Hannah was standing close enough to Tuan for him to hear what sounded like a contented sigh. He wasn't sure exactly what separated a contented sigh from an exasperated one, or a sigh of boredom, or the wistful sort of sigh that accompanied force of nostalgia. The sight of the scrapyard was quite a mess, not the sort of picturesque vista that usually inspired feelings of awe. Leaving already? That's the idea. I did say I wanted to show you something interesting. If you're talking about what's at the end of that catwalk, I've been there before. I came from there, in fact. I'm not interested in what's at the other end of this catwalk. Then where are you going? Going down. Do you get a kick out of that? Not always. But you know those situations when you just want to eject from a conversation? Have you ever found yourself in a social situation that you just wanted to immediately leave behind? I didn't realize you were in such a hurry to get away from me. I wasn't. The problem is that the opportunity to make that grand exit never really coincides with the moments when you'd want it. But I still like to step out of a conversation from time to time, even when it's not called for, just to stay in practice. So your parlor tricks are more important to you than having a conversation with me? Not at all. I like talking about little parlor tricks like this. And what better way to start a conversation about them than by performing one? So now what? Well, I did have another reason for jumping down here. I did tell you there was something I wanted to show you, didn't I? Oh, so that stunt wasn't the main attraction? Our destination is down there. With his finger, Tuan traced a path along several other platforms of descending height, painting a picture of what might follow. You can jump down. I don't have the feet of an athlete. Landing is less about your feet and more about what you do with your legs. Just bend your knees when you land and it'll distribute the impact force to your hip bone instead. Hanging like this is not the best time for me to learn lessons on athleticism, methinks. It's really simple. Just be sure not to lock your knees. The more words you say, the less I feel confident in my ability to execute them. Just do what comes naturally, I guess. I guess my slow and steady method worked. It's a vacuum cleaner? It's got kind of a Roomba-like appearance to it. The pots are all different. How did it get here? If all I can do is roll, how it is supposed to get up or down? Maybe it's not supposed to get up, down or up. Maybe this platform is where the bot's supposed to hang out until someone moves it to some other place. Someone like us? We probably shouldn't mess with it. You're sure? If someone left it here, they're probably going to come looking for it. It would be a problem if we became responsible for getting the bot lost. How would you feel if someone moved something that you left in a specific location? Good question, Tuan. Not like someone just did that to her. If I left something like a purse in a place like this, I would hope someone would pick it up. Maybe turn it in at the cafe. But this little dude seems to have been intentionally left here. Maybe it was left here to finish a job. I think it's bored and waiting for someone to move it. Can we move it? We really shouldn't. Well, okay then. Is this what you wanted to show me? Nah, this is just one place on the way there. Ah, good. He wasn't concerned with appreciating the sights. His eyes moved with purpose, attempting to carve a path forward. We'll get there. Is this safe? I feel like I'm a bit young to be asking that question. Or answering it. You think young people need to take risks? Nope. I'm just too young and inexperienced to recognize danger when I see it. But if it puts your mind at ease, the rubbish we're stepping through has already been stripped for useful parts. So the risk of stepping on something like a live wire or an upturned screw is probably minimal. Probably? Like I said, I'm too young and inexperienced to recognize danger when I see it. Well, you're more experienced than I am, at least. Hannah seemed to grow more comfortable as she followed Tuan, her stride becoming less cautious with each step she took. Though the feeling of paths shifting under her feet made each step a bit uncertain, there was something pleasant about the crunching sound the debris made as it shifted under the weight of their feet. Careful. It's easy to lose your footing out here if you're not careful. No worries, I've tripped many times before. Skinned knees are a part of life. I thought you said you weren't an athlete. How'd you wind up with skinned knees? Well, if I had the grace and balance of an athlete, I wouldn't have to worry about skinned knees, would I? For all his posturing earlier, Tuan wasn't sure he shared Hannah's fearlessness. Taking a tumble onto a grassy hill or a pavement walkway was one thing. Stumbling and potentially landing face first onto a pile of tiny pieces of jagged metal was quite another. He found himself starting to worry if it had been a mistake to try escorting Hannah through this area. Actually, at this point he wasn't escorting so much as trying to keep up. Hannah crested a hill in front of him, and as he opened his mouth to yell out a word of caution, she disappeared over the top and he lost sight of her. Be careful what you put your weight on. What? Is there some pressure trap I'm about to step on? I mean stuff like that beam. You don't know what might be unstable or ready to collapse. Should I really be worried? I think so. That is the kind of place that's easy to get hurt. Then why did you bring me here? It's the easiest way to get to where we're going. Ah, so this scrapyard isn't the main attraction? Well, that's a relief. So, what here is dangerous? Just the cruft that we're stepping through. There's nothing sharp or long enough that it'll break the soles of your shoes, but it's not the kind of surface that you want to land on face first. Noted. I'll try to avoid landing face first. I guess I should exercise a bit more caution, huh? Sorry if I'm a bit rambunctious. I guess I'm bad at evaluating risk. Is that a chronic condition? Well, I followed you here, didn't I? Anything ahead I should take note of? Just more of the same. Sweet, then I guess I know what to expect. This is where we're going, right? Yeah. He wasn't sure if Hannah was growing impatient with him or just eager to get onto the next part of their journey. Looks like a subway tunnel. If your goal was to transition to a more interesting room, I'd say you failed. This hallway tells its own story. I'm struggling to see what that story might be. The walls here are barren. Nobody thought to cover them up with anything. They're conspicuously naked. Why hasn't anyone taken the time to make this place nicer? Maybe the person tasked with decorating this place preferred a minimalist approach. There's no accounting for taste. That's the ultimate cop-out answer. There's no accounting for taste? Of course there is. Taste has to come from somewhere. The human mind is a complex thing. Why should it fall on me to explain it? What happened to the armchair sociologist who was explaining to me earlier how friendships are formed? As far as I'm concerned, some parts of the mind are completely ineffable. I'm the kind of person who looks at the ineffable and doesn't begin trying to F it. Really? Because you strike me as the type of guy who'd try to F anything that wasn't nailed down. Sounds like the kind of person you should run away from. I guess I'm too young and inexperienced to recognize danger when I see it. Careful, don't hurt yourself. Oh, that's what she said. Do I look like someone who's worried about hurting himself? You look more like one of those walking and talking tour guides who has to walk backwards everywhere they go. I'm not sure if that's a demographic that's really known for self-destructive behavior. Hey, that profession is more hazardous than you think. I had a friend who was touring uni campuses and he got a tour from a guide who was backwards walking and talking so hard that he tripped into a fountain. I'm not hurt, thanks for asking. I'm sorry, I know I messed up order of operations. First confirm safety, then have a good laugh at your expense. But sometimes you just feel a good laugh coming on and you don't want to suppress it. Tuan ordinarily would have been a bit ashamed to have taken a tumble, but as Hannah got the remaining giggles out of her system, he saw a twinkle in her eye that made him sure that she was enjoying herself. So, who do we have to thank for that wonderfully comedic moment? The bot seemed dog-like in a way that it looked up at her with anticipation, rocking back and forth on its hindquarters. Can I pet it? Sure, go ahead. Ah! Why did you do that? Why did I do what? Tell me it was okay to pet him. I thought you wanted to pet him. Yeah, I wanted to, but I wasn't asking for your permission. You just seemed really bothered when I said not to touch them. The other times, I mean. I didn't need your permission. I was asking your opinion. You know, since you seem to be such an expert on this place, I thought I'd ask, hey, any risk associated with what I'm about to do? You know, so I can make an informed decision? So imagine my surprise when I do the one action you decided to greenlight and it ends with smarting fingers. Are you okay? I'm fine. I'm fine. Several moments passed in silence as they continued walking. Tuan wasn't sure whether it was a good idea to say something in his defense, but the silence seemed even worse, so he started talking. I thought you'd be really disappointed if I said it would be a bad idea to pet him. Like I said, I wasn't asking for your permission. If I wasn't prepared to hear no as an answer, I wouldn't have asked. I'd very much appreciate it if, when I ask a question, you actually say what you think, rather than telling me what you think I want to hear. I'm sorry. You're forgiven. I guess that dramatic outburst was a little more than what the situation called for. But geez, sharp pinching pain is the worst. Worse than throbbing pain? Of course, why do you think I found it so easy to laugh at your stumble? Throbbing pain is comedy, sharp pain is tragedy. Well, at the very least I hope I've persuaded you of the dangers of backwards walking and talking. Indeed. You should probably do the rest of this hallway walk facing forward. That sounds like a challenge. Thanks for coming out for tonight's tour. This marks the end of our tour of the nondescript hallway. If you think anything is nondescript, you need to come up with better descriptors. I can come up with several. Dull, sterile, boring. Nondescript is such a great word, though. Have you ever read Lovecraft? So many of the monsters in his books were so unimaginably terrifying that their appearance defied explanation. Mighty convenient that for the guy who was writing the books. Who was writing the books? Lovecraft, I just said that. Lovecraft is the name of the author? For real? Yeah. Why would someone name their kid after the word that people use to describe eldritch horrors? You're going to have a real cow when you hear about this guy named Mud. Let me guess. His name was Mud. Indeed. Oh, is this where they are? I don't know if I recognize the place. I feel like I do, but it might just be a place that looks similar. As they scrutinized the jars on the shelf, Tuan couldn't begin to guess what substances they contained. The jars showed signs of being left here long enough to gather dust and wear yellowing labels. A mere tap would be enough to send them tumbling off the shelf. Now this is interesting. Why do you suppose they stick these way out here? Try reading some of the labels and you might get a clue. It's written in some language I don't understand. It's Latin, at least some of them are. You speak Latin? I don't speak Latin per se, but I've sort of developed an ad hoc understanding when it comes to common words, phrases, acronyms, etc. God damn it. These are Latin phrases, I take it? Yes, now that you've explained my joke, it's hilarious. Does your brain come up with wordplay like that on the fly, or do you have that line locked and loaded for any time the subject of Latin comes up? When I was a kid, I spent 2 years taking an after-school linguistics course because my mum thought it was an English class for non-native speakers. You pick up some things along the way, and 6-year-old brains often try to cram as much of what they've learned into a single sentence or paragraph. I'm not 6 years old anymore, but I guess the habit stuck. I don't suppose you can read any of these labels? Nope, but if you see one that says Memento Mori, you should take notice of the fact that you're going to die. What, is that some kind of deadly poison? Nope, Memento Mori, remember your mortality. That's what it means. 6 years old and they were already teaching you to ponder the fact that your life would end one day? What kind of linguistics class were you enrolled in? I was the youngest person in the class by about 5 years, if that tells you anything. That must have been tough to deal with. Nah, it was just the start of a lifelong pattern of me feeling more comfortable around my elders while constantly struggling to connect with my peers. Oh, and here I was thinking we were developing a meaningful rapport. You think we're peers? Because you're pretty peerless when it comes to charm. Ah, shucks. I'm not sure whether I should be embarrassed to be on the receiving end of a compliment, or whether I should feel embarrassed for you after hearing you use such a cheesy line. My compliments are like Cheetos, artificially created in a lab and not good for you at all. When she laughed, there was a certain sparkle in her eye, and on any other night he might get caught up thinking about why people seemed to be on the verge of crying when they laughed. But in this moment, all he could dwell on was how warm it made him feel to see her laughing. How about this one? I can't read it. Yes, but you can see that it's shaking, right? It looks like there's something trapped inside. Whoa, that's kind of creepy. Do you suppose we ought to do something about it? I don't know. Your guess is as good as mine. Whatever's in this jar wants to be out, I think. Do you think it ought to be out? I don't know. Do you think it ought to be trapped? It doesn't really strike me as a nefarious thing. But that's the strongest endorsement I can give. Thank you. Tuan felt a warm glow around them, and it occurred to him that perhaps this was the inverse of what some people might feel upon seeing a benevolent spirit. Did you hear that? If you heard someone whisper thank you, then yes, I heard it too. Do you think we did something we shouldn't have? What's this we stuff? 2 hands touched that jar and they were both yours. Yeah, but I get the feeling that we just unleashed something. I got that impression as well. Do you think we made a mistake? I think that you opened a jar that without your interference would have shattered away. Would have shattered anyway, so I'm not sure that our being here really changed anything. You're right. What if your existence here doesn't really change anything? I wasn't trying to be existential with that comment. So you did it without even trying? Wow, you're a real natural. Oh shucks, nobody's ever told me I have a talent for bringing up existential ambivalence. Well, damn the consequences. I'm glad we came here. I'm glad we came here too. Do you ever get that feeling like you've already sort of committed to a line of action, but you're still not sure whether it's going to lead to something great or something that could hurt you? Are we still talking about the jar? Well, now that you said it, the pretense is gone. Let's get a move on, shall we? Anyway, the thing I wanted to show you is here. Oh, mind the gap. It actually is a train track. Tuan's heart was pounding violently, but he knew himself well enough that it wasn't a fear of heights that was making his heart race. I hope you're not afraid of heights. I think it's natural to be afraid when confronted with a new environment that could be potentially lethal. Oh, don't worry about the lethality. See? Nothing to be afraid of. Hannah touched him in the sort of way Tuan would have expected from her, just to confirm that he was really standing in front of her and not some illusion. But her hand seemed to linger on his chest several moments longer than a simple spot check ought to have taken. He found himself feeling a bit disappointed when she finally withdrew her hand. Doesn't seem pleasant. The fall, I mean. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. Just because you'd survive doesn't mean it would be enjoyable. I know roller coasters are mostly safe, but I avoid them nonetheless. The falling does take a bit of getting used to. There is some deep primal fear in your body that gets unleashed when it realizes that it's had nothing to support its weight for several seconds. You get used to it over time. I get that it must be an exhilarating experience once you get past the sheer terror of it. What I want to know is how you've repeated it enough times to get over the fear. What compels a person to do that sort of thing? Truth be told, I don't know if I've gotten over the fear. Some people like to embrace the terror. It's the same reason that people go to horror movies or read books that make them cry. Or listen to albums that make them sob into their pillow. Yeah, some people just want to feel something, even if that something isn't warm and cuddly feelings. Is that downtown? I think so. But I don't really know the area that well, so you'd have to tell me if you recognize anything. I don't recognize anything specific. But judging from the number of rooftop bars, I'd say you're right about location. Do you suppose any of them can see us up here? I don't know. It's kind of amazing to look at the city like this. I know. How we got up here from down there, I'll never know. I just meant it's very picturesque. The city has a certain kind of beauty to it. It seems lived in. Most cities do, that's why they're cities. People live there. But some cities seem so sterile. Skyscrapers and the like, uniform suburbs. You know, the kind of things that look like they were churned out of a factory on an assembly line. Cities created neighborhoods by neighborhood instead of building by building. It is quite pretty to look at. Is it safe to sit like that? Look, if I can step off this platform, it would be crazy for me to be shy about letting my legs dangle over the edge. As Hannah swung her legs back and forth, Tuan was reminded of the days in his youth when he and his friends sat perched on a fence, swinging their legs in a similar fashion. Tuan wasn't sure why all of his memories of dangling legs lackadaisically were of early childhood. Maybe as his legs grew longer, his desire to try and climb on top of tall structures solely for the sake of sitting on them had waned. Hannah seemed utterly carefree, and the thought occurred to Tuan that it had been a long time since he had seen anyone his age acting in a way that could be described as carefree. It appeared everyone he knew had spent their life gradually accumulating more cares, never stopping to wonder whether having a great number of things to fret over was truly a good thing. At a glance, the cityscape below them seemed vivid and full of detail, but the more that Tuan tried concentrating on any particular part of it, the more his vision blurred. From up here, the city's neighborhoods all seemed to run together, as if the actual structure of the buildings were indifferent to the dividing lines its inhabitants tried to draw. Although the city was divided into different regions, there was no clear point at which North Melbourne ended and Carlton began. Each city block acted as a discrete, yet indistinct part of a larger whole. You know, I should be able to see my house from here, but I can't. Or at the very least, I can't recognize it. Actually, I can't recognize anything. When I look at the broad picture, I say, oh yeah, that's totally the Melbourne skyline. But I can't pick out a single facet or landmark that is where it should be. It's uncanny, isn't it? It certainly has a dreamlike quality to it. Do you think we're in a dream? No, but I have considered the possibility that maybe I'm in a dream and you don't exist. Really? I was thinking it was the other way around. I'm the one who's dreaming and you're the one who doesn't exist. I guess it's all about perspective. Considering the number of dreams that end with the sensation of falling, sitting perched on a rail platform above the clouds would be a good setting for the climax of a dream. Maybe when you stepped off the platform you just tumbled into a different dream. Maybe it doesn't matter if existence is but an illusion, just so long as we're here to experience it. The two sat in silence a few minutes longer, stealing periodic glances at each other. Tuan wondered what might be happening in Hannah's head. Perhaps Hannah's mind was taken up with thoughts of what Tuan was pondering. Oddly, despite the silence, they seemed to have grown closer, as if somehow imagining what another person was thinking was somehow enough to make you feel as if you knew them better. You know, if the purpose of coming here was just to sit and stare longingly into each other's eyes, we could have done that back at the cafe. I came up here to admire the view, and that's what I'm doing. That's a good line. That is indeed a good line. But for all your verbal wit, you sure are slow to act. Don't you think you're long overdue to make a move? Why did it take you so long? It's easier to say something clever than to say something sincere. I lied to you earlier. About what? Remember when I told you about my mother's leukemia diagnosis? How I was 13 years old at the time and my father left us? Yeah, I remember. Well, I lied about one thing. My mum wasn't the one who got the leukemia diagnosis. This hair isn't mine. 6 months of chemo were not kind to me. I felt like a fraud every time I tried wearing someone else's hair, so I got this synthetic prop wig from a costume shop. I decided if I was going to lie to the world about having hair, I might as well go full Rapunzel. I'd like to hear you say something. I shouldn't be surprised. You wouldn't make light of someone else's ailment. You take shots at other people when it's something trivial, and you take shots at yourself when it's something that matters. So when you started joking about cancer, I figured you were talking about yourself. It was that obvious? Not at first, but the more you talk to someone, the more you come to understand them. You interrupted something. I know. I was leaning into... I know. I still like to, if you'd like to. Sorry, the mood is gone. My fault. I ruined it. You need to reset the scene. That sounded like a request. It was. Tuan knew the rules of conduct in the terminal. As the last familiar sound of the cafe slowly receded into the distance, he came to realize that we're now entering a world of their own construction. They were in a place without rules handed down to them by whoever policed behavior in the cafe. The idea that the two were free to do as they pleased was a thrilling yet frightening prospect. Perhaps thrilling and frightening didn't have such different meanings. Tuan wasn't sure where they were walking to. Perhaps they were heading towards where they had originally come from. Or they were moving onward only to leave the past behind them. But Tuan knew for certain they would eventually need to turn back. Despite the revelation that had come only moments earlier, Tuan felt oddly at peace. Hannah had shared a secret with him. It was an affirming thing. It was, in a way, what he had expected. In fact, things were happening almost exactly as he had imagined, and that filled him with an overwhelming sense of dread. The fear that someone might discover him for who he was. He felt his heartbeat quicken as his mind raced for what would come next, and the uncertainty seemed to manifest as a sort of pain in his chest. He started feeling the slight sharp and cold prick of pins and needles on the skin of his legs, and he suddenly wanted nothing but for the moment to be over. As his eyes closed, the world around him became nothing but blackness. He felt only the panging sensation coursing through his body until he opened his eyes and then realized that he was panting and that Hannah was rubbing his back. Are you okay? Chronically, no, but I'm fine right now. It's an anxiety attack. They happen sometimes when I get afraid. Not that you have to, but I'd feel better if you had a quip. I was just thinking it's a good thing it didn't happen when we were sitting on the edge. It never happens when I'm in a physically precarious position. Never. It's always the moment when it seems like everything is in a comfortable place, free from any sense of peril. Because when everything is going right, it only takes the littlest thing to upset that and make everything go wrong. Is it what I said before? Not how you think. It's not what you said. It's what I didn't say. What didn't you say? I knew. Natural redheads rarely have blue eyes. That was my first clue. And when you started talking about chemo, that was when I put it together. You knew? Yes. I wouldn't have the courage to talk to you otherwise. The best friendships I ever made were the ones that came with an expiration date. That's what you said earlier. I think I understand now. He could see a wetness around the corners of her eyes. It was a look he was familiar with, but he was used to seeing it in a mirror, the moment right before the tears started to flow. But the tears never came, and Hannah's eyes remained fixed on his, her gaze brimming with a sadness, frustration or anger that Tuan couldn't quite place. That's what you see me as? A girl with an expiration date? It's not because of what you are. It's because of what I am. I didn't want to reduce everything to. I've been carrying around a lot of baggage. I came here because I wanted to feel normal for just one night. That's what I wanted too. I just wanted to leave everything behind and just feel normal. I guess we both messed up pretty bad, but I don't mind. He suddenly became aware that the lips were nearly close enough to touch. But that moment, that feeling of being so close to kissing, felt so perfect that he couldn't bring himself to end it by kissing her. The two continued to enjoy each other's company, teetering on the brink of a kind of physical intimacy that Tuan himself both longed for and dreaded. He wondered what she was feeling. He wondered if she had the same thoughts about him. But as time passed, his fears and concerns began to melt away, and he found himself simply taking joy from the fact that he was holding her and she was holding him. And regardless of why they were here, what they were thinking or what was in store for them, they were both here together. As Hannah buried her face in his shoulder, Tuan felt her shaking in his arms. He felt her hot tears as they soaked through the fabric of his shirt. He wondered if these tears were the kind that people fondly expressed as coming from a good cry. Moments later, he felt tears on his own cheeks. His first reflex was to hide them, as he had so many times before. And yet, as he felt the warmth streaming down his cheeks, he could see nothing but a kind, beautiful acceptance in Hannah's eyes. Tuan wondered if there was a world in which a tram might pull up to this platform in the sky, so he and Hannah might board it to be whisked away and never return home. Though he had a hunch she was thinking the same thing. They both knew they couldn't ride away together, but they could at least escape the platform, if only for a moment. Are you ready? As long as it's with you. Just don't let go of my hand. Tuan felt Hannah's grip on his hand tighten as they tumbled off the edge together. The feeling of exhilaration passed just as quickly as it had come. As Tuan stared into Hannah's wide, sparkling eyes, he found himself no longer feeling the same longing and excitement that he had felt before. It was replaced with a new feeling. He felt a sense of contentment that made the moment feel so perfect that he knew they had to find the perfect way to end it before something came along to ruin it. With no words to share, they had only the sound of each other's footsteps, and as they walked, Tuan became increasingly aware of Hannah varying the pace of her footsteps ever so slightly to keep up with his. He slowed to match her pace, and within a few strides they were walking in lockstep. And then he found himself slowing down again, letting Hannah take the lead, only for her to show her own steps once more. Each of them began walking slower, almost as if they were in a race that both of them were determined not to win. "You know we can't keep doing this all day. Try me." As time passed, Tuan saw that Hannah's eyes were focused on nothing in particular, in a way that told him that her mind was someplace else. Strangely, it comforted him to know that Hannah, even when she was with him enjoying their company, did not seem to feel the need to perpetually present. She was willing to let her mind wander, and as Tuan retreated deeper into his own thoughts, he wondered if perhaps the most intimate thing that two people could do was each be alone together. Him in his own little world and she in hers, each enjoying the company of the other while also absorbed in the privacy of their own thoughts. "You went out tonight looking for something very specific." "Yeah. I might not be that specific thing. And if that's true, then I'm okay with it. And if it's not, then I guess I'm okay with that too." "Me too. At least I hope so." The first time they had passed a shelf of glass jars, Tuan had seen them as a motley assortment of unrelated items. It was at first glance a mess. But the more that Tuan concentrated on any given jar, the more he came to realize that each one was cut to a specific shape or size and contained a specific item. He looked at Hannah, who seemed to be absorbed in her own thoughts, and wondered if she too was observing the jars in front of them. Or if perhaps her mind was contemplating something else entirely, turning over thoughts of the evening they had spent together, or the time they had shared on the train platform. You think that I'm carrying around a lot of pain?" "You're right, I just assumed it." Tuan became aware of the flaws, limitations, and shortcomings that were an inescapable part of who he was. It served as a reminder that every moment he lived was a sort of gift. As long as he was enjoying being allowed to experience the moment, he really felt he had nothing to complain about. Of course he still felt pain and didn't enjoy it. His position of accepting the moment wasn't something he had come to easily. But now he was so firmly rooted in his stance, nothing that happened around him was going to change it. Tuan thought he should vocalize this, and yet it seemed selfish to do so in front of Hannah, who very well might not be carrying that same sort of self-acceptance. And if the moment called for him to be silent, he was okay with that. I've been thinking about myself. I assumed that you were carrying around a lot of pain, not because of anything about you in particular. It's because I assume everyone is carrying around a lot of pain. Because it makes it easier when I assume that everyone else is going through the same thing. I think I've figured out one thing about you. I think you like me. Is that such a surprise? I just gave you a new piece of information, and it's a pretty big one. Did you think this was going to be the sort of thing where you reveal some big thing and then I say I like you anyway? Because it's different from that. Not for me, anyway. You're carrying around some stuff. Stuff that's a part of who I am. And I accept that. I like you. I like all of you. And when I say that, I'm not just saying it just because I want the rest of you, but because I want that specific part of you, for no reason other than that it's a part of you. Because every part of you is part of a cohesive whole, and you can't remove any of it without changing who you are. It's like an atom, where if you remove a single proton, you alter its composition and it becomes something else that's fundamentally different from what it was before. You don't get to carve out your favorite or least favorite parts. So when I say I like you, I mean I like all of you, because that's the only way for me to say that I like you and actually mean it. You're not the first person who's ever said something like this to me before, you know? I've heard it in counseling before, but I think you're the first person who's ever said that and made me believe it. The most offensive way for someone to lie to you is to simply tell you what they think you want to hear. Yeah, you get it. Are you ready to do this? I'm ready as long as you're doing it with me. Then don't let go of my hand. Swan waited for the moment when Hannah's form would start to fade, vanishing in the way that visitors from beyond the grave always did upon leaving the terminal. But moments passed, and he realized that the feeling of her hand in his was still just as real and tangible as it had been on the other side of the boundary that separated the terminal from the land of the living. Are you... I'm still here. I go in for my next round of chemo tomorrow. Say, don't you think you're long overdue? That was Necrobarista walking to the sky. That was lovely, quite sad as well. Came close to crying a bit, but pulled myself together for the video. I would have definitely cried if I was just playing this by myself. Other than that, yeah, that's I think it was part 2 of 3 planned DLC releases. The first one was just a bit of like a gallery, I think. I was looking through this menu before. I couldn't find it. I would have to look it up afterwards. And not enough for like its own video. But yeah, there's supposed to be at least one more story or like side story coming out. I'm really glad that they're doing this. I mean, I've almost forgotten how good the soundtrack was. I mean, as expected of Kevin Penkin. How good, but mostly about how good the storytelling is. It really combined tragedy with a bit of comedy really well. I think I could see myself in some of the characteristic traits of them as well. Although I've not got a terminal illness, which is good for me, I suppose. But yeah, I really enjoyed this, and I hope you did as well. And I hope you'll come back and watch the next / maybe the last part of Necrobarista, I don't know, whenever it will come out, and I'll be sure to play through that as well on my channel. So thank you for watching. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.